It is April 18th, 2026, and self-improvement is really hard because it's not something that can happen passively. And yes, some people do naturally change over the progression of time, but you kind of have to let it happen. You have to make the conscious choice to let it happen. And that's because, in order to improve, you can't keep doing the same thing and expecting progression. Slapping a new coat of paint on something isn't actual change, it's just new paint. It's been quite the running gag on this channel, and if you're new here, hi. I've cycled through a lot of designs or redesigns, rebrands, and revamps over the years, and none of them quite stuck around for very long. I think the longest one that stuck around was 2 years. And every time I changed, it was because something felt off. I was no longer happy with the design I was using to present myself with, or the way I was presenting myself. So I would change it without actually thinking about the root cause of my unhappiness. Yes, I did feel unsatisfied with the mask because it covered up who I was. It was not an authentic reflection of myself, but I was covering up who I was. I was ignoring who I was as a whole because it felt too basic, too simple. The need to be unique was suffocating. Because I didn't want to be just another hazel-eyed brunette white chick that likes talking about books. Let me guess, you're into Goblincore and not Cottagecore because Goblincore has bones and they're edgy XD. Ever since I've taken up journaling, I've also taken the opportunity to psychoanalyze myself, and you would be surprised how much of a personality is actually just a trauma response. Because, in all honesty, I do like cottagecore. This is such a random example. I actually do like the neutral-toned, soft, cozy, sunbeam, berry-picking aesthetic of cottagecore. But I held on to goblincore and grunge due to, shall we say, morbid reasons. A lot of my old identity is just a bunch of things that I held on to for reasons that were very unhealthy. Now, on the outside, it didn't. My obsession with, things like butterflies and choosing a rabbit as a persona and all that, on the outside doesn't seem all that crazy or unhealthy. But the root and inner reason of why I was doing it is inherently unhealthy, and I needed to let all that go. But while I was holding on to other parts of my identity that weren't healthy, I was suppressing other parts of myself that didn't satisfy my need to be unique, in air quotes. And I was honestly just lying to myself. Of course I love cottagecore aesthetics. Who wouldn't want to live a life that is essentially just Hobbiton? Like the man said, it is no bad thing to celebrate a simple life. And while we're being honest with ourselves, I'm gonna say it. Alright, I'll say it. I'll say it with my full chest, alright? I'm gonna say it. Beige is not a bad color. Old me would not have said that. Old me would perish the thought of even thinking of having anything to do with the color beige. Ew. Old me would have thrown up at the mere sight or even mention of that accursed color, when it's essentially just sandy brown. However, old me was also very unhappy. And low-key hated themselves. But that's the thing, I didn't always hate myself. As a kid, I was happy, so what changed? Well, it's because young children, the reason why they're so happy with themselves and are so unapologetically just interested in a wide variety of things and have no fear and don't hate themselves, is because they haven't been taught shame yet. For the most part. They have no shame. There's nothing to be ashamed of in being yourself, so that's why your childhood counterpart is usually, depending on your upbringing, of course, the happiest version of yourself. And I didn't come to this conclusion by happenstance. I had to go back and look at my past identities with a fine-tooth comb. I made a full-ass timeline. Not just a compilation like with my Too Many Faces video, nay. I collected, as much as I could find, instances of personas or things I used to represent myself and broke them down. And I noticed my younger self from childhood to at least the age of 17, I had a very consistent self-image. And then I decided to become a YouTuber. Now, it's not YouTube's fault. I'm not blaming YouTube, but the cycle of redesigning did get a lot faster since becoming more active on YouTube. Now, that may be because I went from being a child and transitioned into adulthood, and I was trying to figure out what that meant for me. You know, they always say, oh, your 20s are for rediscovering, making mistakes, and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, but I'm 28 years old. No. I am turning 28 this year. I got 2 more years to figure myself out before I hit 30 when I'm supposed to have everything figured out. But that's just bullshit. As I am slowly discovering from actually paying attention and listening to what other people are saying, no one ever has their life figured out or put together. They just pretend that they do because of fear, because of shame. So you want to know what your 20s are actually for? Your 20s are for living. Same as your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And life is change. So if you feel stuck in your life, what are you not allowing to happen? What are you ignoring or repressing? What are you afraid of? I am afraid of being abandoned and cast aside. So I coped with that fear by trying so hard to be different, unique, and unforgettable. But I also wanted to be seen for who I truly was while I was stuffing down who I truly was. So how do you change? Think about why you're unhappy with yourself or your life. And what are you doing because of that unhappiness? What need is not being met? And what are you doing because of that unhappiness that is feeding into that fear? And once you have recognized what your greatest fear is and what you are doing because of that fear, this is where you have to decide if this is something that you are going to merely acknowledge its existence, or are you going to let it go? And then whatever you decide to do, let it happen. Because the parts of you that you have locked away and buried out of learned shame, like most locked boxes that have been buried for many years, they usually contain treasure. This all to say, I'm a cat girl now. Nya.